And so then he came to the committee meeting and he says, I have an hour and 50 minutes. How's that? And he's whittled it down to 50 minutes, which is kind of hard to believe, Max. But he also has 900 videos on his YouTube channel. 900, that's incredible. So please take advantage of checking those out. All right, Max, I'll turn it over to you.
My contention is that all Woodstock students are indeed well-traveled alumni. We all have our stories. Here's a part of mine. I was born August 31st, 1949 in Landar Community Hospital, nestled 7,000 feet up in the foothills of the Himalayan mountains in North India. Shortly after my birth, my mother, brother, and I took the long train trip to the village of Bihar in central India. Though I looked a little concerned about my new environs, my father looked pretty pleased at our arrival in Bihar. After only a few months in the village, we traveled to the United States on board the Queen Mary. This trip to the United States is a trip we would take every 5 years. The village of Bihar, though, was my home while growing up. We never stayed in one place long. Every year we had to leave Bihar and make the long 3-day trip by train to school. Every 5 years, though, we spent a year in the United States, which was home for my parents. I arrived in the United States the first time when I was 6 months old. Our second trip was when I was in second grade. I was in Kansas City for my freshman year of high school, but it was always a year when my brother and I looked forward to traveling back home. My final trip to the United States was to attend Central Methodist College in Fayette, Missouri. Since then, I have been back 24 times. Often I have taken tour groups with me. So, there were many trips from home to the United States. I was interested in this third trip just because the way we dressed back then in order to travel by train. The fourth trip was when I graduated. I was interested, surprised, that my parents let me go at the airport in Delhi. I had no idea what I was going to do for the next 2 weeks, nor did they. I just had passage on the Queen Elizabeth from Southampton to New York 2 weeks later. But when I got there, I met up with 2 of my classmates. We all wanted to do different things, but we compromised and ended up doing some of it together. We visited a lot of castles. However, coming from Woodstock, we had never seen miniskirts. And so part of the time we just sat, grinned, and watched. Now my first trip back home to India was during college. My father arranged for another scooter, and so we had 2 for a trip from Delhi to Rishikesh, Uttarkashi, and Missouri. I wanted my father to see a part of India that I deeply, deeply loved that he had never seen. And so we followed some of those beautiful aqua blue rivers up into the mountains, this one going to Uttarkashi. My second trip back home and first trip for my wife Sally after we had been married a year, we arrived in Delhi where my parents were living. Here we are at the old fort. When I lived there, you could just drive around. Now you pay admission to get in. Now we were there in June and it was very hot. And I had told Sally, sure, in Delhi you can wear shorts. Here she is telling me, Max, you cannot wear shorts in Delhi. Everyone has been looking at me like I was naked. And so seamstress that she is, she made some long dresses and 1 pair of long pants. Here we are in front of the American Embassy which is a beautiful, beautiful building, and it is such a shame that you can hardly see it from the street these days because it is so barricaded. Such a disappointment. From Delhi, we went up to Missouri, of course. I showed her where I was born, showed her where I went to school, and then we did some hiking. Here we are at the top of our hill, looking over to Flag Hill, a place where we hiked to a lot. And every group I took to Woodstock to volunteer, we went to Flag Hill. From Missouri, we went down to central India, to the village where I grew up. The Methodist Church was the most prominent building in the village when I was there. Here we are in this, we had no electricity, but here's this central street of our village. From Bihar, we went down to Chandrakal. Sally's father was a Methodist pastor. He died on her 5th birthday. And so the churches of the area raised money to build a school and a church in Chandrakal. And of course, we had to go and see it. My third trip was back when my daughter was 2 years, almost 2 years. We waited as long as we could so she would know not to put her hands in her mouth. But if we left before she was 2, her seat only was 10% of the cost. So she had her 2nd birthday in India. She loved the animals, particularly the monkeys. And here we are at the Qutb Minar. Now she's 2. We went back when she was 35, and I tried to find the same rock she sat on there. And it had been moved a little bit, but still the background was similar. And so I got a picture of her when she was 35. Now my 4th trip to India was when my parents retired, and it was my first time to go to South India, first time to drink water from the green coconut, and it is an acquired taste, but I acquired it and I love it. In 1986, I became, for the Methodist Church, the Volunteers and Mission Coordinator for an 8-state area, and that greatly increased my travelability. Most of my travel has been church connected and mission related. In the early 80s, the Volunteers and Mission movement began in almost every denomination. Before that time, church members raised money, recruited missionaries, sent them around the world, and they continue to do that. But after the 80s, when travel became more easily accessible, people in the pews wanted not only to send their money, but they wanted to go and actually see, and in many cases, do. My first mission trip was to Costa Rica. I don't have any pictures of that trip, because 4 years ago, I sold my home and downsized to my VW van. And what do you do with thousands of beautiful pictures? I literally trashed thousands of pictures of the slides that I had. And so I don't have any pictures of that first mission trip I took to Costa Rica. However, there are stories. When we got to the airport, Taka Airlines informed us that the plane had been overbooked, and we needed to decide which half of our team would go today and which half of the team would go tomorrow. We explained that as soon as we hit the ground in Costa Rica, all of our plans were made with our whole team being together, and we needed to travel together. Well, they said, well, we'll see what we can do. They came back 10 or 15 minutes later and said, we can get everyone on your team on except for one person. But then they said, if one of your women will volunteer to ride in the cockpit, we can take your whole team. So our whole team went. It was before, obviously, 9/11. We worked at the Latin American Biblical University, one of the largest seminaries in the world. It serves North, South, and Central America. 19 centers in 14 countries, but the main campus was in San Jose, Costa Rica, and at some time during their seminary career, usually students ended up there. It was not the best location. On one corner of the seminary campus was where the prostitutes gathered to be picked up at night, and on the other corner was where the transvestite prostitutes gathered to be picked up. And so for people coming in from very rural very rural Bolivia, Peru, all of these places, it was a very congested part of the city. Now, land had been given for a new seminary campus, but there were no funds. It was away in a residential city, a part of the city, in an ideal place. Now, when we had the first woman president of this seminary, in her inaugural address, she gave her dream of the $1 Million Women campaign to find 1 million women who would give $1 apiece. She wanted the money to come from the poorest, $1 apiece in honor of a woman or of a woman who had influenced their faith positively. But they opened it up to take $1 from men too, and $1 in the name of a woman who had influenced their faith. And so the work began. We sent about 25 teams from Missouri, and here's one of the many teams that I led.
Costa Rica, with its banana trees and ancient sculptures, with its beautiful flowers and interesting rainforest animals, with its people who love music and dance. And of course, with its tamales, was host to another Volunteers in Mission team from Missouri.
Now, part of the mission of our team was to build bunk beds for the seminary dormitory, and so we used the tools that they had available and built really nice bunk beds. We were proud of them. Our other part was to build a new building, and so there was a lot of rebar to be tied. There was a lot of cement to be mixed. The walls started going up because it was an earthquake-prone area. We used a lot of rebar to build it to code, and the building went up.
One beautiful evening found the group dining 2,000 feet above the city lights of San Jose. After supper, high school students presented the entertainment. One of the goals of every Volunteers in Mission experience is that of getting acquainted with the host area. In Costa Rica, that may mean a visit to the rainforest. An aerial tram has been constructed to take visitors to the rainforest in Costa Rica right up into the beautiful canopy. A guide accompanies each tram.
Now, our lawyers worked it out with the IRS that if only one day was devoted to sightseeing and the rest of the time was in actual travel and work, then team members could take off from their income tax the mission trip. And so the campus went up.
The campus architecture is representative of the various racial and cultural groups in the country. The main building is that of Mayan architecture. It houses classrooms, offices, and the library. The design of the Women's Center is that of the typical Costa Rican farmhouse. The thatched roof of the round chapel represents the Afro-Caribbean community. And the new dormitory complex, where the team slept, captures the Spanish influence.
It interested me that India seemed pretty close in my world, but South America seemed an extremely long distance away until I went for the first time. And then it seemed like South America was not so far away. It became a part of my world. I'm sure you've had that experience in places where you've gone. It was interesting flying into Bolivia to La Paz, the capital, which is the highest international airport in the world. What surprised me about going there was taking off. Because the air was so thin, you went and went and went. You wondered if there would be enough runway space, and you'd wonder if you just would go off the head of the cliff when they got there. But it did take off finally. In Bolivia, we had a number of teams there. This team that I led We stayed in the capital, but Sunday morning found us way out in the mountains at this church. What surprised me, we went there in a Toyota pickup. They're not all that big. Probably 5 should have fit in the cab. We had 8. And in the bed of the pickup, we had 10. And what surprised me was that one of our team members really freaked out because there would not be a seatbelt. And it just, in international travel, not even in domestic travel, sometimes we find ourselves outside our comfort zone, and definitely that team member was. We decided to get really heavily involved in Mozambique. It was at a time the Civil War had concluded, and the United Nations labeled it as the poorest country in the world. Today, every Methodist church in Mozambique is partnered with a Methodist church in Missouri, and there are a lot of interchanges going back and forth. I enjoyed, never been on South African Airlines. It was fun to do that. Now my board said, Max, you've got to start taking video. Now, in my defense, at that time, slides were far superior than anything that a video camera, amateur video camera could produce. But I bought a camera, took it to Mozambique, opened it up in the motel room, and I could not get it to work. Now, my roommate on this team was our youth representative. And he said, we've got something like that. Let me look. He took the lens cap off and it worked fine. Now, I, from 4th grade, have been taking still camera pictures. I was the photographer for our Whispering Pine at Woodstock, and automatically, without thinking of it, I always take off the lens cap. But this was a different animal, and it surprises me that I had not thought of that. But I made my first video, Goats for Mozambique, which you can see if you want to go. It's kind of grainy because video back there still was pretty grainy. Now, what surprised me in every worship service we went to was the enthusiasm of worship. Maybe it shouldn't have surprised me, but it did. And what surprised me further was that the most joyful part of the service was the offering, when people literally danced and sang down the aisle to put their offering in the plate. Now, we tried to introduce this back in Missouri, and it did not work as well. Now, going to Karachi, Pakistan, I had a big surprise. I could understand what people were saying, and people could understand me. So, one of the first places we went was Trinity Girls Degree College, and during the introductions, this woman was introduced as the Urdu teacher. And so when our meeting was over, I went up to her and I said, what's the difference between Urdu and Hindi? She said, it's the same. How is it that growing up all through my life in India, I did not know that? But it was a surprise that I could understand what people were saying in Pakistan. Now there was another surprise. It shouldn't have surprised me maybe that there are modern malls in Pakistan. But what surprised me even further was we were there on Valentine's Day, a Christian holiday, and down at the bottom, it was decorated from top to bottom for Valentine's Day. And this surprised me, to be met at the entrance with Winnie the Pooh being my Valentine. Now our teams to Peru stayed with families, and that was a different experience, really a good experience.
The 12-hour trip took 6 hours extra because of a volcano eruption in Ecuador. But finally we reached the capital city of Lima and were soon invited into the home of the Barreras as their guests for a week. Benvenuto means welcome, and they did indeed make us feel very welcome. Each day they prepared 3 wonderful meals for us. One evening they taught us some new games.
That's flour?
Yes, that is ordinary wheat flour. The object is to slice away the flour without letting the ring fall. We will need to drastically speed up the game if we are to see it in its entirety. And of course, we all knew that on someone's turn, the ring would eventually fall. And we knew the consequence.
In Lima, we were working at one of the centers from that seminary in Costa Rica. We did a lot of painting. My wife, Sally, volunteered to do the intricate painting behind the lettering. The other part of this team was to provide this center with a library that they did not have. And so we built 8 sturdy library tables, along with a cadenza for the librarian, complete with a place for the computer. We bought the chairs to go with it. We did not make the chairs. And we bought the shelving and put it together for the books. It was a great experience at the end to have the students come in and actually start having class around some of those tables. As usual, one day was devoted to sightseeing.
We visited and learned about the ancient ruins at Pachacamac. We climbed to the very top of the Sun Temple built by the Incas. From the top, we could see the Pacific Ocean.
The Incas built the Sun Temple because they used the Sun Temple like astronomy observatory.
The precise stone cutting of the Incas have amazed engineers from around the world.
And so we sent out hundreds of volunteers, church members wanting to go and see and do all around the world. I had never taken a group to India, but one of our conference treasurers said, he had never been out of the country. He said, I'd like to go to India with you. And so we went. Here we find ourselves in a village for a heifer international project, a goat project. Okay, who took Mrs. Kapadia's Hindi class? Bakri palo, paneer khalo. 10 goats and you will eat cheese. Now, Heifer International, you may already know, it's a program where 2 animals, male and female, are given to a pre-selected poor family. When they have their first offspring, their offspring are given to another poor family, pre-selected, and it is a gift that just keeps on giving, on and on and on.
कितना बच्चे हुए? 2 बच्चे.
Now, when it was a women's it organizes a women's cooperative, and so each woman for her family had a bank account, which they had never had before. When they found out that I had brought our conference treasurer, they brought out their books for him to examine, and he found that they were doing a great job. Now, I took Reuben to Woodstock, and we stayed in 2 of the guest rooms in the quad, and one day he came terrified out of his room, wondering to know what on earth was going on. He found out. After that, I started taking groups to India. The first several were to Woodstock, and we called it Missouri to Missouri.
They arrived at night. They were a team of 14 volunteers in missions sent by the Missouri Conference to serve for 2 weeks in India. Their mission destination was the city of Missouri, nestled high in the Himalayan mountains of North India. First, there were sights to see in the capital city of New Delhi, where their American Airlines flight had set them down. The team lodged at the Grand People Hotel in the very crowded part of the city known as Carol Bagh. A little before midnight on their second night in India, they boarded the Mussoorie Express, which during the night would take them 160 miles to the north, to the foothills of the Himalayan mountains. In the crisp, cool morning air, their train pulled into the Dehradun station. Leaving Dehradun behind, their taxis skillfully maneuvered the hairpin turns which took them the 20 miles up to the city of Mussoorie. Mussoorie is now a tourist destination for people from all over India, especially during the summer months as people escape for a short while the intense heat of the plains of India. Mussoorie is also where Woodstock School is located. The streets of Landauer Bazaar were designed for travel by foot and donkey, but now have the added burden of all kinds of vehicles. Once through the bazaar, the Woodstock campus became visible. Some of the Missouri volunteers served in the Woodstock school libraries.
During the week, they went through the shelves, making sure that every book was in its correct place. They also worked at getting new books into circulation. The rest of the volunteers worked at the new organic research garden. The team dug terraces and watered plants. Gravity flow water came from a nearby spring. Two major projects included putting a concrete floor in a recently erected implement shed and adding a chicken coop to the organic garden enterprise. A whole lot of gravel had to be carried down the mountain, and a whole lot of water had to be carried up the mountain to make concrete for the floor of the implement shed. Working alongside friends from India, the Missouri team learned a new and improved way of moving dirt. A rope was attached to the shovel, and while one person guided the shovel, another person pulled it along, making the work of shoveling a team effort and a whole lot easier. With the help of a visiting group of students from the Allahabad Agricultural Institute who had traveled to Woodstock to study the organic garden, bricks were moved up the mountainside.
The school was very appreciative of the volunteer labor and financial resources that the Missouri team contributed to their new educational garden project.
Sally and I applied to be missionaries in India in 76 and could not get visas. So I served the church in Missouri in that area for 40 years, and then I got the dream job for a missionary kid for a post-retirement job. I got serving the board, the U.S. board of the Ludhiana Christian Medical College in India. Ludhiana is kind of up in the area of Mussoorie. It's near the Pakistan border, near Amritsar. And it was my dream job to work with them and to go twice a year to Ludhiana. And so naturally I took volunteer teams. Now we had to volunteer in a different way. We could not get work permits at all. And so these teams were study teams. They came and learned all about what was going on at the hospital and college, then went back and spoke in Rotary groups and Lions clubs and churches, wherever people would listen, to raise money for equipment for the hospital and college. Now, I love taking people to this area because there is so much to see. I like going to the Golden Temple in Amritsar. Now, the Golden Temple serves thousands of people lunch every day. And so every group I took, we got our plates and went to our place on the floor, sat down, and were served a delicious Indian meal. Most of what is done there is done by volunteers, so we had quite an affinity. The food is cooked by volunteers. I think some of the actual cooking is done by professionals, but every year, every day, they serve thousands upon people and all Gurdwaras do, even in the United States. I enjoyed taking particularly the women to buy material and have Punjabi outfits made. I particularly enjoyed taking them to be fitted for saris. It was a joy to go through parts of the city that they would not have ordinarily gone to. But when we got there, it was amazing to see how skillfully they let you see how beautiful you were going to be in a sari. Well, if orange you don't think is your color, well, we'll try blue. And Carol and we tried on 4 different colors, ended up buying 2. They knew what they were doing. The more you put on and to let you see how beautiful you are, the more you sell. One of our teams had just an incredible experience.
In their last night in Ludhiana, they received an opportunity, which for Americans is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. They were invited by Dr. Kunal Jain to his cousin's wedding. They were even invited to join the extended family procession, as with great pomp and ceremony they slowly accompanied the groom on his white horse to meet the bride and her extended family in the wedding palace, for the wedding ceremony which would go on into the wee hours of the morning. Because of the need to arise at 5:30 a.m. to catch their train back to Delhi, the U.S. group left the festivities just before midnight.
Talk about surprises. And I shared the surprise with every group I took. I was not sure just what to expect when I was urged to attend the nightly India-Pakistan border closing ceremony. But the size and enthusiasm of the crowd on both sides of the border was truly unexpected. I was surprised and amazed. The pre-border closing ceremony lasted over an hour. I happened to be sitting on the India side of the border. Girls took turns running the flag up and down the highway. The decked-out border security forces entertained with their high kicks and precision marching. There was dancing and merriment. There was singing. Patriotic chants were orchestrated. Here you can see the people on the Pakistan side. And finally, as the sun set, came what everyone was waiting for. The flags of both countries were lowered at precisely the same time. The flags were ceremoniously carried off to be stored for the night. And after a handshake between the security forces, the border was ceremoniously closed for the night. The following day, the ceremony grounds would become national highways with cars, buses, trucks, and motorcycles plying both directions. Every night, 2 nuclear powers put their enmity and hostility toward each other aside, and with coordinated precision, entertained crowds on both sides of the border. Now, I would still be working for Ludhiana, and Sally hoped that I would be still having that job after she was gone. She struggled with colon cancer for 18 months, and the last 6 months of her life, I retired from Louisiana to take care of her, and we had a wonderful last 6 months together. And here we are in a picnic the week she died. But before she died, she urged me to buy a van to travel. She knew I liked to travel. We had tent camped for almost every summer of our 48 years. So I bought the van. I had to wait till the pandemic was over, unfortunately, but finally I sold my home and moved full-time into Henry and became a nomad. And there are nomad projects all over the United States, and so you pick one in a part of the United States you haven't been to, you go and explore the area. You meet, basically you're doing maintenance, which I'm not all that skilled at, but I can follow directions. Maintenance for children's homes and church camps. I go from here to Goshen, Indiana for my next Nomads project at a children's home there. You meet like-minded people, and I have thoroughly enjoyed this kind of service in retirement. You work for each project is 3 weeks. You work Monday through Thursday and then have a 3-day weekend to explore this new area of the country, or you can just relax. They provide the RV hookups and construction supplies. You provide the volunteer labor, the food, and the lodging. Here to show the nomad projects that I have served on and the ones that I have signed up for the next year and a half. It's a popular program, so you almost have to sign up a year in advance before the teams fill up. The other thing I wanted to do in traveling was to visit all of my classmates and many of my schoolmates, and so I designed a map with pinpoints where my classmates were, and I started out. Now I made a video of each year of my travels. I'm only going to show the 2020 video because it got cut short at the end of January, so it was only 1 month long, but it shows the people I visited. But even though the travel that year was just for 1 month, still I got to visit 6 classmates and 4 schoolmates, not counting all the visits on Zoom and otherwise. I made a video for each one of the years. It's kind of fun to go back and see where I went and who I saw. Now, one of my classmates lived in New Zealand, Glennis Robinson. Now, I took her to the junior-senior banquet in the junior year, and I'm sorry, I felt kind of bad. I hogged her. I took her back on the second senior year as well. Now, we've corresponded through the years, and she said I must come visit. I finally said, okay, when would be a good time to come? She and her husband told me, and I said, well, can I come for a week? She said, no, you cannot come for a week. You have to come for at least a month. Come and take our camper van and see New Zealand like you do in the United States. My flight from Denver to Los Angeles to Fiji to Auckland, New Zealand took 23 hours. It was a joy to be met at the Auckland airport by schoolmate Derek Bean. His sister Heather was a classmate whom we sadly lost to cancer some years back. The drive to Mangawhai, where classmate Glennis Robinson Mather and her husband David lived, took about 3 hours. Waiting there was schoolmate Alan Robinson and his wife Yvonne. We had such a good time talking about school days in India and getting reacquainted with each other. I made 4 videos of the 1 month I traveled in their camper van around New Zealand. If you've been there and want some nostalgia, you can go watch them. If you haven't been there and want to know what it would be like to go there and travel around, they are available online. I was fascinated with the Maori culture and made a video about what I learned about the Maori culture while I was there. It was time to bid goodbye to New Zealand and head to the United States. What a grand time I had had visiting my classmate Glennis and her husband David and touring their beautiful country in their caravan. My route had taken me from the north of New Zealand down to the very south. What an amazing trip it was. Thanks Glennis and David so very much. My most recent trip was just 2 months ago with my daughter Laura. We went back to India. I made videos of each one for the month of travel, going to Woodstock, going to Khajuraho, Kolkata, Chandigarh, Simla, and of course what I often call my spiritual home, Mussoorie and the surrounding area there. Our destination was Bihar, my home from birth through high school. With electricity now, the previously small, sleepy village had grown into a large, unrecognizable town. The once prominent Methodist church was now surrounded by other buildings. However, it was wonderful to see that the congregation of young people was thriving. Once in Bihar, we met up with my Facebook friends Victor and Aradhana Ashish. Aradhana's grandfather, Padri Dilraj, was my parents' Hindi tutor when they first arrived in India in 1945. We also met up with one of my daily childhood playmates, Mabel, dressed here in the red sari. Our mission in Mussoorie was scattering the remaining ashes of Laura's mother and my wife, Sally, on Flag Hill, where the Tibetans have traditionally tied their prayer flags. It was a climb up to the top that Sally and I had made many times together. Our whole family was to have scattered her ashes on Flag Hill in March of 2020. That month, travel plans around the world were canceled by the pandemic, as were ours. Laura and I felt fortunate that it was a lovely sunny day with the eternal snow-covered high Himalayan mountains visible. And so we bid Sally goodbye one more time. Months beforehand, as I planned my trip to India, I booked flights to Kolkata, another city I have never visited. My intention was to visit my classmate Sudhir Prakash. The last time I saw Sudhir was in 2017 when he invited our class to end our 50th class reunion with a complimentary 3-night at his family's Glenburn Tea Plantation Resort in Darjeeling. Sadly, Sudhir passed away before my visit. I continued on and had a lovely visit with his wife Poonam and their family. They gave me a complimentary night in their Glenburn Penthouse Luxury Hotel in Kolkata. Everything from the bedspreads to the tables were adorned with tea leaves. And so I contend that all Woodstock students are well-traveled alumni. I've heard some of your stories. I wish I could hear all of them. Thank you for letting me share mine.